Before Ohio was even a state, something unexplainable occurred, an event so chilling that it reshaped how early America recorded its history. Dr. Margaret Chen had spent 17 years studying colonial American history, but nothing had prepared her for what she found in the basement archives of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania that rainy October afternoon in 2024. The leather-bound journal, its pages brown with age and smelling of must and old smoke, had been misfiled in a box marked Merchant Records 1745-1755. The handwriting was cramped and frantic, written in fading ink that had turned rust-colored over the centuries. But it was the date on the first page that made her breath catch. June 15th, 1750, and the location, the Ohio country. She adjusted her reading glasses and began to read, her hands trembling slightly as she turned the delicate pages. From the Journal of Captain Edmund Whitmore, June 15th, 1750, we departed Fort Cumberland this morning, 18 souls strong, bound for the Ohio country, with instructions from the Virginia Company to survey lands west of the Alleghenies and establish contact with the native tribes for purposes of trade. The men are in good spirits despite the arduous journey ahead. Among our number, myself as commander, Lieutenant James Hartwell, Dr. Cornelius Webb, Surveyor Thomas Blackwood, and 14 hardy frontiersmen and laborers. The company has given me sealed orders to be opened only upon reaching the confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers. I confess this secrecy troubles me, though I dare not speak it aloud to the men. June 28th, 1750. We have been traveling for 13 days now, and the wilderness grows ever more oppressive. The forests here are unlike anything we knew in Virginia. Ancient, towering trees that block out the sun, creating a perpetual twilight even at midday. The men have grown quieter. Yesterday, Private Cooper swore he saw figures moving parallel to our path through the trees, keeping pace with us, but never showing themselves clearly. I dismissed it as nerves and the play of light through the leaves, but I have seen them too. Shadows that move wrong, that linger too long in the peripheral vision. July 2nd, 1750. We have reached the confluence. The rivers meet here in a majestic display of nature's power, and the land is indeed as rich as the company hoped. This would be an excellent location for a fort and trading post. I opened the sealed orders tonight in my tent by candlelight. What I read has left me profoundly disturbed. The company does not merely want us to survey and trade. We are to search for something, a specific location described in the journal of a French trader named Jacques Bellemont, who passed through this region in 1739. According to Bellemont, there exists in the Ohio country a place the native peoples call the Hollow Ground, which they avoid absolutely, considering it cursed or sacred. The translation is unclear. Bellemont claimed to have found evidence of a pre-Columbian civilization in this location, including stone structures and artifacts of a sophistication that seemed impossible for the indigenous peoples. More disturbing still, he wrote of finding human remains, hundreds of them, in a configuration that suggested some sort of ritual or catastrophe. The company wants me to find this place. They want the artifacts. They want proof. I have not yet told the men. I'm not sure I should. July 5th, 1750. We encountered a small group of Shawnee hunters today. Through our interpreter, a half-French trapper named Dubois, who joined us at Fort Cumberland, I inquired about the Hollow Ground. The effect was immediate and disturbing. The lead hunter, a man of perhaps 40 years, with scars across his chest, became visibly agitated. He warned us in broken English mixed with his own tongue that the place we sought was where the earth opens and the old ones walk. When I pressed him for directions, he refused. All 4 hunters left our camp immediately, despite our offerings of trade goods. Dubois tells me he has never seen the Shawnee so frightened. They are not a timid people. July 8th, 1750, Private Cooper is dead. We found him this morning 50 yards from camp, though 4 men swore they had heard nothing during the night. His body was unmarked save for his eyes, which were open and bulging with what appeared to be absolute terror. Dr. Webb could find no cause of death, no wound, no evidence of poison or disease. The men are badly shaken. 3 have approached me about turning back. I have reminded them of their contracts and duties, but in truth, I am as unnerved as they are. Something about Cooper's expression haunts me. A man does not die of fear alone. Yet what else could explain it? We buried him with what ceremony we could manage. I read from scriptures, though. I fear the words felt hollow here, in this oppressive wilderness. July 12th, 1750. We have found it. Thomas Blackwood was surveying to the northwest of our camp when he discovered a peculiar depression in the land, a bowl-shaped valley, perhaps 2 miles across, ringed by steep, forested hills. The trees within this valley are different from those surrounding it. They are twisted, their trunks bent at unnatural angles, and there is no undergrowth beneath them. The ground itself seems wrong. Too soft in places, too hard in others, with no consistency or logic to it. But it is what we found at the center of the valley that has left us all disturbed beyond measure. There are structures there, not wigwams or longhouses, but stone buildings, or rather, the ruins of stone buildings. They are partially sunken into the earth, as if the ground has been slowly swallowing them over centuries. The architecture is like nothing I have seen before. The stones are massive, fitted together with such precision that one cannot slide a knife blade between them. Yet there is no mortar. The angles are wrong, somehow creating an optical effect that makes one feel dizzy when looking at them too long. Blackwood estimates the structures are at least 300 years old, possibly far older. But the native peoples of this region have no tradition of stone building on such a scale. Who built this place? And why was it abandoned? July 13th, 1750. We have spent the day exploring the ruins. There are 7 structures in total, arranged in a circle around a central plaza. In the middle of this plaza is a well or shaft of some kind, descending into the earth at a slight angle. The opening is perhaps 6 feet across, lined with those same precisely fitted stones. Dr. Webb descended 20 feet on a rope before calling out that the shaft opened into a larger chamber. Against my better judgment, I agreed that we would mount a proper exploration tomorrow. The men rigged a pulley system, and we have prepared torches and rope. I should be excited by this discovery. The Virginia Company will surely reward us handsomely. But instead, I feel a growing dread. There is something fundamentally wrong about this place. The air feels heavy, and despite the summer heat, it is cold here. Bone cold. No birds sing. No insects buzz. In all our time in this valley, we have seen no animals whatsoever. Lieutenant Hartwell has voiced his concerns about proceeding. I respect his judgment, but we have come too far to turn back now without investigating fully. July 14th, 1750. God have mercy on us. God have mercy on us all. We descended into the shaft at first light. Myself, Hartwell, Dr. Webb, Blackwood, Dubois, and 4 of the strongest men. The shaft, as Webb had reported, opened after 20 feet into a vast chamber. Our torches illuminated only a fraction of the space, but what we could see defied explanation. The chamber was not natural. It had been excavated and shaped. The walls smooth and marked with carvings, symbols, and pictographs unlike any native art I have ever encountered. But it was what occupied the center of the chamber that froze our blood. There were bodies, hundreds of them. But not skeletons, not entirely. Somehow, impossibly, they had been preserved, mummified, perhaps, though Dr. Webb swears the conditions here should not allow for such preservation. They were arranged in concentric circles, all facing inward toward a raised stone platform at the very center. The bodies were of various ages, men and women and even children, all dressed in rotted remnants of clothing that bore no resemblance to any native garb I have seen. And their faces all wore the same expression that we had seen on Private Cooper. Absolute, paralyzing terror. But this was not the worst of it. On the platform at the center lay a figure unlike the others. It was larger, nearly 7 feet in length, and its proportions were subtly wrong in ways I struggle to describe. The limbs were too long. The skull was misshapen, elongated. It was dressed in robes of a material that had not decayed, covered in the same strange symbols that marked the walls. Blackwood, in a moment of inexcusable foolishness, approached the platform and reached out to touch one of the artifacts scattered around the central figure. A disc of some dark metal, engraved with spiral patterns that seemed to move in the torchlight. The moment his hand made contact, everything changed. The air in the chamber grew colder still, and a sound began, a low humming that seemed to come from the stone itself, vibrating in our chests and skulls. The torches flickered and nearly went out. And then, God help me, I saw the bodies move. Not all of them, just small movements at first, a twitching finger, a shifting head. But it was enough. We fled. We scrambled up that shaft like demons were at our heels, and perhaps they were. Behind us, the humming grew louder, and I swear I heard voices, countless voices, speaking in unison in a language that hurt to hear. We emerged into daylight, and I ordered the shaft sealed immediately. The men piled stones into the opening, working with frantic speed, driven by a primal terror. Blackwood still had the disc. I should have made him throw it back down the shaft, but he clutched it to his chest and would not let go. His eyes had a strange light in them. He kept muttering about understanding and translation. July 15th, 1750, Blackwood has not slept. He sits by the fire, studying the disc, tracing the patterns with his fingers, and muttering to himself in words I do not recognize. Dr. Webb is concerned he has suffered some sort of mental break from the trauma of yesterday's events. The rest of the men are insisting we leave immediately. I have agreed. We will pack and depart at dawn. Whatever secrets this place holds, they are not meant for mortal men to uncover, but I fear it may already be too late. July 16th, 1750. We should have left yesterday. We should have left the moment we found this cursed valley. Thomas Blackwood is gone. We found his tent empty this morning, the disc missing with him. A search party tracked his footprints back to the ruins, back to the shaft. The stones we had piled there had been moved aside from within. The opening gaped like a wound in the earth. Lieutenant Hartwell and 6 men went down to search for him. They returned 15 minutes later, running, panicked. They sealed the shaft again, using twice as many stones, and would not speak of what they had seen below. Hartwell finally told me privately. The bodies were gone. The chamber was empty, save for Blackwood, who stood on the central platform with the disc held above his head, speaking in that alien tongue, in a voice that was not his own. When they called to him, he turned, and Hartwell said his face was not the face of any living man. His eyes were black from lid to lid, and his skin had taken on a greyish pallor. He smiled at them, Hartwell said, and that smile contained such malevolence, such ancient hatred, that they could bear it no longer. We are preparing to leave immediately in broad daylight rather than waiting for dawn. The men are barely holding together. 3 have deserted already, fleeing into the woods. I have not tried to stop them. Perhaps they have the right idea. July 17th, 1750. They do not want us to leave. We managed to get 5 miles from the valley before we encountered them on the trail, the bodies from the chamber, walking, moving with an eerie coordination, as if controlled by a single will. They did not attack. They simply stood there, blocking our path, watching us with dead eyes. We attempted to go around them, to find another route, but they are everywhere, forming a perimeter around us, herding us back toward the valley. We fired upon them, and our shots struck home, but they did not fall. They did not even seem to notice. Dubois is praying in French. Dr. Webb has become catatonic with fear. The men are discussing desperate measures, attempting to fight our way through, splitting up and running in different directions. But where would we run? These things, whatever they are, know this land far better than we do. I have been a fool. The Virginia Company sent us here not as explorers or traders, but as an offering. They knew what was here. That damned French trader's journal told them. And now we will pay the price for their greed. Night is falling. We have made camp with our backs to a steep ravine, hoping to at least limit the directions from which they can approach. Every man is armed. We will sell our lives dearly if it comes to that. But I fear death is not what awaits us. July 18th, 1750. This will be my final entry. I do not expect to see another dawn. They came for us in the night, not to kill. We learned quickly that death is a mercy they do not offer, but to take us. 7 men are gone, simply vanished from the camp in the darkest hours, though we had sentries posted. One moment they were there, the next they were not. At sunrise, we saw them, our missing men, standing with the others at the edge of the tree line. Already their faces were changing, taking on that same grey pallor, their eyes darkening. They did not speak. They did not cry out for help. They simply watched us with those terrible eyes. We are down to 9 survivors. Lieutenant Hartwell has taken his own life with his pistol, rather than face whatever transformation awaits. I cannot blame him. I have considered the same, but I will not give them that satisfaction. I will write this account as fully as possible, in the hope that someone may find it and learn from our fate. The journal and maps I will place in the waterproof oilskin case we brought for protecting documents. Perhaps it will survive even if we do not. To whoever reads this, do not seek the hollow ground. Do not disturb what lies beneath. The things that sleep there are older than our civilization, older perhaps than humanity itself. They were here before, and they will be here after we are dust and memory. The native peoples knew. They had the wisdom to leave this place alone, to mark it as forbidden ground. We, in our arrogance and greed, ignored their warnings. Now we will join the others. I can feel it beginning even as I write. A coldness spreading from the center of my chest, a whispering in my mind in words I should not understand, but somehow do. They are calling us, the old ones. They want us to come home, to take our places in the circle, to wait with them until what, I do not know. I pray I never learn. The sun is setting. They are moving closer. Dr. Webb is weeping. The remaining men have formed a circle, weapons ready. But we all know it is futile. If you find this journal, tell our families we died well. Tell them anything but the truth. Some knowledge is too terrible to be borne. May God have mercy on our souls, for no one else will. Captain Edmund Whitmore, July 18th, 1750, the Ohio country. Dr. Margaret Chen sat back from the journal, her heart pounding. The archive room suddenly felt too small, too dark, despite the fluorescent lights. She checked her watch. She'd been reading for nearly 3 hours. This had to be a hoax, an elaborate period piece, perhaps created for some Halloween entertainment in the 19th century. But the paper was genuinely old. She'd stake her professional reputation on it. The ink was right for the period. The language, the style, the handwriting, all consistent with mid-18th century documentation. She photographed every page with her phone, her hands still trembling slightly, then carefully returned the journal to its box. But before leaving the archives, she did something that would change everything. She ran a search through the digital catalog for any other documents from the same time period, mentioning the Ohio country, the Virginia Company, or Captain Edmund Whitmore. She found 3 items. The first was a letter dated September 1750 from the Virginia Company to the colonial governor, expressing concern over the failure to return of Captain Whitmore's expedition and requesting assistance in mounting a search party. The second was a report from that search party, dated November 1750. They had found the expedition's camp at the confluence of the rivers, but no sign of the men themselves. Supplies were scattered, as if abandoned in haste. Most disturbing was this line: "We discovered evidence of excavation and exploration of structures of unknown origin, approximately 5 miles northwest of the camp. The men have left no indication of their fate or direction of travel." The third document made her blood run cold. It was a letter from a Moravian missionary named Johann Schmidt, dated June 1751, describing his encounters with the Delaware people in the Ohio country. He mentioned that the native peoples had told him of a place where white men had awakened something ancient, and that the Delaware shamans performed ceremonies of binding and warding around a valley they would not name or approach. Margaret sat in her apartment that night, unable to sleep, the copies of the documents spread across her dining table. Her academic training told her to be skeptical, to look for rational explanations. But the historian in her recognized the ring of truth in these documents. They fit together too well, referenced real people and places, contained details that would have been nearly impossible to fake convincingly. She made a decision. She would find the hollow ground. Over the next 6 months, Dr. Chen threw herself into research with an intensity that worried her colleagues. She cross-referenced Whitmore's descriptions with modern topographical maps of the Ohio River Valley. She studied archaeological reports of pre-Columbian sites in the region. She interviewed historians who specialized in Native American oral traditions, carefully probing for any legends that matched what she'd read. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source: a graduate student studying the journals of George Washington, who had surveyed the Ohio country in the early 1750s. Buried in Washington's private notes was a cryptic entry from 1753 about a place the savages will not discuss, and which I was advised to avoid by every guide and interpreter. Washington's coordinates, when plotted on a modern map, indicated a valley approximately 40 miles southeast of present-day Pittsburgh. Dr. Chen arrived in Pennsylvania in late April, just as spring was beginning to green the forests. She told no one exactly where she was going. In retrospect, a foolish decision, but she'd convinced herself she was just conducting preliminary reconnaissance. She hired a local guide, a taciturn man named Mike, who knew the backwoods as well as anyone. They hiked for 3 hours through increasingly difficult terrain. The GPS coordinates led them to a bowl-shaped valley, exactly as Whitmore had described, ringed by steep, tree-covered hills. "Funny thing about this place," Mike said, pausing at the rim of the valley. "Been hunting these woods for 30 years. Never seen any game in there. Not a deer, not even a rabbit. Trees are all wrong too." "See how they grow?" Margaret saw. The trees were bent and twisted, their trunks curving in ways that defied normal growth patterns. And the silence. She'd been so focused on finding the location that she hadn't noticed. But Mike was right. There were no bird calls, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Just an oppressive, heavy silence. "You sure you want to go down there?" Mike asked. "Indians around here still won't go near this valley. Call it cursed ground." Margaret thought of Captain Whitmore's final entry, his warning to leave this place undisturbed. But she'd come too far to turn back now. "I'm sure." The descent into the valley was treacherous, the slope steeper than it appeared from above. The temperature dropped noticeably as they descended, and Margaret found herself suppressing a shiver despite her heavy jacket. The air felt thick, hard to breathe, as if the oxygen content were somehow lower here. The ruins were exactly where Whitmore's journal said they would be. 7 stone structures, partially sunken, arranged in a circle around a central plaza. The stones were massive, fitted with impossible precision, just as he'd described. Margaret approached the nearest structure, running her hand over the weathered surface, feeling the strange symbols carved into the stone. They were unlike any Native American petroglyphs she'd ever studied. The patterns seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of her eye, creating a disorienting effect that made her stomach turn. "Christ," Mike muttered behind her. "How old is this?" "I don't know," Margaret admitted, "but it predates any known native civilization in this region." At the center of the plaza, they found it, the shaft. It had been sealed. Large stones had been placed over the opening, probably relatively recently, given how they sat on top of the ground rather than being grown over. But there was a gap, perhaps 2 feet wide, where stones had been moved or shifted. Margaret knelt at the edge, shining her flashlight into the darkness. The beam disappeared into blackness, revealing nothing of what lay below. "Don't even think about it," Mike said firmly. "Whatever's down there has been sealed up for a reason." He was right, of course. The rational thing to do would be to document the site, report it to the appropriate archaeological authorities, and let experts handle the excavation properly and safely. But Margaret had not been thinking rationally since she'd found Whitmore's journal. She'd become obsessed, driven by a need to know what had really happened here, to understand what the captain and his men had found. "I'm just going to look," she said. 20 feet down, just like the journal says. Just a quick look to confirm the chamber is there. Mike's expression made it clear what he thought of that idea, but he helped her rig the rope anyway, securing it around one of the stone pillars. Margaret tested her weight on it, then slowly began to descend into the shaft. The temperature dropped dramatically within the first 10 feet. Her breath came out in visible clouds. The walls of the shaft were smooth, lined with those precisely fitted stones, covered in more of the disturbing symbols. They seemed to spiral downward, guiding the eye towards the darkness below. At 20 feet, just as Whitmore had written, the shaft opened into a larger space. Margaret's flashlight beam swept across a vast chamber, and she gasped. The bodies were gone, of course. Whatever had been here in 1750 had long since crumbled to dust or been removed. But the chamber itself remained, and it was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. The walls were covered floor to ceiling with carvings and inscriptions, mathematical formulas that seemed far too advanced for any pre-Columbian civilization, star charts showing constellations that weren't quite right, and images, disturbing images of figures that were humanoid but wrong in subtle ways, with too many joints, too many fingers, heads that were shaped incorrectly. At the center of the chamber stood the platform Whitmore had described, and on that platform lay something that made Margaret's blood run cold. A body. Not ancient, not mummified, recent. She scrambled down the last few feet of rope and approached with mounting horror. The person, a man dressed in modern hiking clothes, lay on his back on the platform, his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes were open and staring, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. But that wasn't what made Margaret scream. What made her scream was the disc he clutched in his hands. A disc of dark metal, covered in spiral patterns that seemed to move in a flashlight beam. "Hey!" Mike's voice echoed down the shaft. "You okay down there?" Margaret couldn't answer. She was backing away from the platform, her light sweeping wildly around the chamber. There were more bodies. She'd missed them in her initial survey, but they were there, scattered in the shadows at the edges of the chamber. 5 of them, all in modern clothing, all with that same expression of terror. And they were recent, days old at most. "I'm coming up," Margaret shouted, her voice high with panic. She grabbed the rope and began climbing, moving faster than was safe, her hands slipping on the smooth fiber. Behind her, she could hear something, a low humming that seemed to emanate from the stone itself, growing louder with each passing second. She erupted from the shaft into daylight and collapsed on the plaza stones, gasping for breath. Mike pulled her away from the opening, his eyes wide with alarm. "What did you see?" "Bodies," Margaret panted. "Recent ones. We need to call the police. We need to—" The humming was louder now, audible even above ground. And from the shaft came a sound like wind, except the air wasn't moving. It was a breathing sound, vast and deep, as if the earth itself were exhaling. "Run," Mike said simply, and they ran. They scrambled up the slope of the valley, not looking back, driven by a primal terror that transcended rational thought. Margaret's lungs burned, her legs ached, but she didn't stop until they reached the rim and burst out into the normal forest beyond. Only then did they look back. The valley seemed darker somehow, as if a shadow had fallen over it despite the bright afternoon sun, and in the silence they could still hear it, that deep, resonant humming, like a heartbeat buried in the earth. The police investigation was swift and disturbing. The bodies in the chamber were identified as members of a spelunking club from Pittsburgh who had gone missing 3 weeks earlier. The official cause of death was listed as hypothermia and asphyxiation. They'd apparently gotten lost in the chamber and succumbed to the elements. But the detective who interviewed Margaret, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Kwan, didn't buy that explanation any more than Margaret did. Hypothermia in April, Detective Kwan said, sitting across from Margaret in the hospital where she'd been taken for observation. In a chamber that, according to the rescue team, was actually quite warm, and all 6 of them with those expressions on their faces. No signs of panic, no evidence they tried to find their way out. "What do you think happened?" Margaret asked. Kwan was quiet for a long moment. "I think there are some places humans aren't meant to go. I think there are some doors that shouldn't be opened." She paused, then added, "The FBI has taken over the investigation. They're calling it a site of national archaeological importance. They've sealed the whole valley. No one goes in or out." Margaret never got to see the chamber again. The FBI's archaeological crimes team cordoned off the entire area, and within a month, they'd built a fence around the valley perimeter. Official statements spoke of protecting a sensitive pre-Columbian site and preserving cultural heritage. But Margaret knew better. She'd seen the fear in Detective Kwan's eyes. She'd felt the wrongness of that place. And she'd done her research in the weeks that followed. There had been other incidents. A logging crew in 1893 that had disappeared in that valley. All 12 men vanished without a trace. A geological survey team in 1967 that had reported unusual seismic activity before cutting their expedition short. Local hikers and hunters who'd reported strange humming sounds, feelings of being watched, sudden inexplicable terror that drove them from the area. The native peoples had known all along. The Delaware, the Shawnee, the Iroquois. They all had stories about this place, though the details varied. A place where the old ones slept. A door to the world below. A prison for those who came before. 6 months after her expedition, Dr. Margaret Chen published a paper in the Journal of American Archaeology titled Pre-Columbian Structures in the Ohio Valley, Evidence of an Unknown Civilization. It was carefully worded, focusing on the architectural features and avoiding any mention of the more disturbing aspects of her findings. It caused a minor stir in academic circles, but was largely dismissed as speculative. She never mentioned Captain Whitmore's journal. She'd returned it to the archives, filing it where it belonged, where perhaps it would sleep for another few centuries before someone else found it. But she kept copies, and she kept researching. Because the more Margaret dug into the historical record, the more she found. References to similar sites scattered across North America, places the indigenous peoples avoided, locations where early European explorers had encountered things they couldn't explain and chose not to report officially. There was a pattern. These sites appeared at irregular intervals across the continent, from the Pacific Northwest to the Great Lakes to the Appalachians, always in remote areas, always avoided by native peoples, and always associated with disappearances, with stories of ancient beings, with warnings passed down through generations. Margaret created a map, plotting all the locations she'd found. When she connected them, they formed a pattern, a geometric design that matched the spirals carved on that metal disc she'd seen in the chamber. Whatever had built those structures in the Ohio Valley had built others. They'd been here long before humans, or perhaps they'd been human once and become something else. They'd left their mark on the land, left their prisons or temples or tombs. And sometimes, when the seals were broken or the doors were opened, they woke. Captain Whitmore and his men had paid the price for their intrusion. So had those spelunkers. So had countless others over the centuries who'd stumbled into places they shouldn't have gone. Margaret thought about destroying her research, burning the copies of the journal, erasing the map. But she didn't. Instead, she wrote everything down in a secure document, encrypted and stored in multiple locations, to be released only after her death. Because people needed to know, not the general public. That would cause panic, disbelief, chaos. But future researchers, future explorers, they needed to know what signs to look for, what warnings to heed, what places to leave undisturbed. Dr. Margaret Chen stood at her office window, looking out over the university campus. It was late October, almost exactly a year since she'd found Whitmore's journal. The leaves were turning red and gold, students hurried between buildings, and the world continued on in blissful ignorance of what lay beneath certain patches of American soil. Her phone rang. Detective Kwan. Dr. Chen, I thought you should know. They're sealing the shaft. Using concrete and steel, filling the whole thing in. The official story is that it's structurally unsound, a danger to anyone who might try to explore it. That's probably for the best, Margaret said quietly. Yeah. A pause. I've been thinking about what you said about other sites, about there being more places like that valley. There are. The FBI knows, doesn't it? That's why they responded so quickly, why they classified everything, why they're being so secretive. This isn't the first time they've dealt with something like this. Margaret didn't answer. She didn't need to. Jesus, Kwan breathed. How many? How many of these places are there? I don't know, dozens maybe, perhaps hundreds. Most of them sealed, undiscovered, protected by geography and by the wisdom of peoples who learned to avoid them long ago. But people keep finding them, yes, and people keep ignoring the warnings. Keep thinking they're smarter than everyone who came before. Keep believing that old legends are just superstition. So what do we do? Margaret thought of Captain Whitmore's final words, his desperate hope that someone would learn from his fate. We remember, she said. We pass on the warnings. We make sure the knowledge doesn't die. Will anyone listen? Some will. The ones who need to. And maybe, if we're lucky, that'll be enough. After hanging up, Margaret returned to her computer. She had a lecture to prepare on pre-Columbian architecture in North America. She'd be showing slides of pyramids in Mexico, earthen mounds in Mississippi, cliff dwellings in Colorado. All the sites that were well documented, well studied, safe. She wouldn't mention the Ohio Valley. She wouldn't talk about the hollow ground. That knowledge was too dangerous, too likely to inspire the wrong kind of curiosity. But in her notes, in her private files, in the encrypted documents that would be released someday, she'd left the truth. She'd left Whitmore's journal and her own research and all the evidence she'd compiled. And at the end of it all, she'd written the same warning that had been passed down through generations of native peoples, the same warning that Whitmore had tried to leave, the same warning that she hoped future generations would finally heed. There are places where humanity is not welcome, places where things older and stranger than us sleep or wait or watch. These places are marked by signs that transcend culture and time. The silence of animals, the fear of indigenous peoples, the wrongness that makes the spine prickle and the stomach turn. When you find such places, do not enter, do not disturb, do not seek to understand or explore or claim. Simply mark them, warn others, and walk away. Some doors are meant to remain closed. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Some ground is hollow for a reason, and what lies beneath is neither dead nor sleeping, but something far worse, waiting. Historical note. The documents referenced in this account, Captain Whitmore's journal, the Virginia Company correspondence, Johann Schmidt's letter, and George Washington's private notes, exist in various archives across the eastern United States. Whether they describe real events or elaborate period fictions remains a matter of scholarly debate. What is not debatable is that certain locations in the Ohio Valley remain off-limits to the public, protected by federal law under the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. The reasons given are always reasonable: cultural sensitivity, structural instability, environmental protection. But those who know, those who've researched deeply enough, those who've connected the dots across centuries of warnings and disappearances, they understand the real reason some places are protected not for what they contain, but from what they contain. And in the darkness beneath the earth, in chambers sealed by ancient peoples and resealed by modern authorities, in the hollow ground and places like it scattered across the continent, something waits.